He laughed in my face during the meeting, calling my proposal a joke in front of the entire executive board. 48 hours later, his $9 million bonus was frozen, not because I complained, not because I begged, but because I planned for this moment, every single day for the past 3 years. And when he finally slipped, I made sure there was no way back up. My name is Hannah Mercer, and at 34, I'd built my entire career on being the reliable one, the product director who delivered, the one who stayed late debugging code while others networked at happy hours. At Arden One Technologies, I was the architect behind 3 of our most successful products, though you'd never know it from the company's press releases. The meeting that changed everything started at 10:30 a.m. on a Tuesday. I remember because I'd rehearsed my presentation exactly 17 times, timing each slide transition, anticipating every possible question. We were pitching to Northbridge Capital, one of the biggest venture firms in Silicon Valley, and this round of funding would determine whether we'd make it to IPO. I stood at the head of the conference room, my laser pointer steady despite the tremor in my hands. The Northbridge partners sat stone-faced around the polished table, their expressions unreadable. Derek Langford, our 29-year-old CEO, lounged in his chair at the opposite end, scrolling through his phone. As you can see from our user retention metrics, I began, clicking to the next slide, we've identified a critical vulnerability in our data privacy protocols that needs immediate attention before we scale. Sorry. What? Derek's voice cut through my words like a blade. He finally looked up from his phone, that practiced smile spreading across his face. Hannah, are you seriously bringing up hypothetical problems in front of our investors? It's not hypothetical, I said carefully. Our current encryption standards don't meet the new California privacy regulations. If we don't address this before the IPO, Derek laughed. Actually laughed. Not a polite chuckle or an awkward clearing of the throat. A full, dismissive laugh that echoed off the glass walls. This is a joke, right? He looked around at the Northbridge partners, inviting them into his amusement. Hannah here likes to catastrophize. It's her thing. Very thorough. Our Hannah. Maybe too thorough. The room shifted. I felt it in the way the investors glanced at each other, in the way my colleagues suddenly found their laptops fascinating. Sarah from marketing wouldn't meet my eyes. James from engineering stared at his coffee cup like it held the secrets of the universe. The technical documentation clearly shows, I tried again. The technical documentation shows we're ready to scale, Derek interrupted, standing now, moving toward the screen like he owned not just the room, but the entire building. What Hannah calls a vulnerability is actually just, how should I put this? Paranoid overthinking from someone who maybe doesn't understand the bigger picture. My throat constricted. 3 years. 3 years of 70-hour weeks. Of building the infrastructure that made his vision possible. Of watching him take credit for my innovations. And now this. I wrote those protocols, I said quietly. Exactly my point. Derek's smile widened. You wrote them. So of course you see problems everywhere. It's like asking a hypochondriac if they're healthy. He turned to the investors. Gentlemen, ladies, let me show you the real numbers, the ones that matter. He clicked past my remaining slides, past the security assessments I'd spent weeks preparing, past the mitigation strategies, past everything that mattered and pulled up his growth projections. Rainbow-colored charts filled the screen, each one more optimistic than the last. I stood there, invisible now, my presentation remote useless in my hand. The Northbridge partners leaned forward, suddenly engaged, asking Derek about user acquisition costs and market penetration. He answered with the kind of confident bullshit that only someone who'd never written a line of code could manage. Hannah, Derek said without looking at me, why don't you grab us some fresh coffee? I think we're running low. The dismissal was so casual, so complete, that for a moment I couldn't move. Then Emma Chen from Northbridge, the only woman on their team, caught my eye. Something passed between us. Not pity, recognition. I set down my remote with deliberate calm. Of course, I said. Coffee, right away. As I walked out of that conference room, past the wall of press clippings celebrating Derek as the millennial genius revolutionizing tech, I made a decision. I wouldn't quit. I wouldn't rage. I wouldn't give him the satisfaction. I would wait. I would watch. And I would make absolutely certain that when Derek Langford finally fell, It would be from a height so great that there would be nothing left to salvage. The coffee maker gurgled in the break room as I stood there, planning. 3 years of silence had taught me patience. Now it was time to learn a different skill. It was time to learn how to destroy someone who thought he was untouchable. 3 years, 1,095 days of swallowing my pride, biting my tongue, and watching Derek Langford build his empire on foundations I had laid. It started small, the way these things always do. My first week at Arden 1, I'd proposed a revolutionary approach to user data management, something that would later become the core of our flagship product. Derek had listened politely in the meeting, nodded thoughtfully, then presented my exact idea to the board the following Monday as his weekend epiphany. "Great minds think alike," he'd said when I confronted him, that easy smile never wavering. "Besides, Hannah, we're a team here. Your success is my success. My success is yours." Except it wasn't. His success was a 7-figure salary, a corner office, and his face on the cover of Tech Insider. My success was a 2% annual raise and the privilege of fixing critical bugs at 3 a.m. while he partied with investors. I learned to document everything after that. Every email, every code commit, every casual conversation where Derek would pick my brain about hypothetical solutions to problems he'd later claimed to have solved himself. My personal laptop at home became a fortress of evidence, organized by date, cross-referenced by project. The second product I built, an AI-driven analytics platform, took 6 months of 18-hour days. I remember the night I finally cracked the algorithm, sitting in my cramped apartment, my sister Lily asleep on the couch beside me. She'd just finished another round of chemo, and I'd been coding with one hand while holding her hand with the other. "You're going to change the world," she'd murmured, half awake. "I just want to change our world," I'd whispered back. "Get you better doctors, better treatment, better everything." The platform launched to phenomenal success. TechCrunch called it ingenious. Forbes dubbed it the future of business intelligence. Derek did 7 podcasts that week, describing in detail how he'd conceived the idea during a meditation retreat in Big Sur. I started recording our meetings after that. California's 2-party consent law meant I couldn't use them legally, but I needed them for my sanity, to remind myself, on the hardest days, that I wasn't crazy, that this was really happening. The third product was when things got interesting. Data Vault. Our enterprise security solution required integration with government compliance standards. Real, serious stuff that Derek couldn't just hand-wave away. He needed me to interface with the technical auditors, to explain the intricate details of our encryption protocols. "Just keep it simple," he'd instructed before one particularly crucial meeting with federal regulators. "These government types don't need to know everything." But they did need to know everything. That was literally their job. So I told them about the shortcuts Derek had insisted on to accelerate our launch timeline, about the temporary workarounds that had somehow become permanent features, about the user data that wasn't quite as secure as our marketing materials claimed. Derek was furious afterward, but what could he do? Fire me for being too thorough with federal regulators. Instead, he did something worse. He promoted me. Director of Product Innovation, a title that sounded impressive but came with no team, no budget, and no actual authority, a glass cage designed to keep me visible but powerless. I accepted it with a smile, let him think he'd won, let him believe I was properly domesticated, grateful for whatever scraps he threw my way. Meanwhile, I kept building, keep documenting, keep watching. The emails from investors were particularly interesting. "We need someone who actually understands the technical side," one prominent VC wrote to Derek, CCing me. "Can you have Hannah walk us through the architecture?" Derek would forward these to me with instructions to handle it, while he focused on strategic vision. I handled it. All right. I made sure those investors knew exactly who was building what. Professional, of course, subtle, but clear. By year 3, I had everything. Code repositories showing my commits, email threads documenting Derek's borrowed ideas, financial projections I'd created that he'd presented as his own. Even security footage from the office cameras showing me working through weekends while Derek's keycard showed him leaving by 5 p.m. every day. But I waited, because timing, I'd learned, was everything in tech. You could have the best product in the world, but launch it at the wrong moment, and it would sink without a trace. The IPO announcement was my starting gun: $50 million in Series C funding, a $2 billion valuation, and Derek's compensation package including that $9 million bonus tied to a successful public offering. $9 million. I thought about Lily, about the experimental treatment her insurance wouldn't cover, about the medical bills that kept me awake at night. I thought about every line of code I'd written, every weekend I'd sacrificed, every idea I'd watched him steal. The meeting with Northbridge Capital wasn't a humiliation, it was a gift, because Derek had finally made a mistake. He'd dismissed me in front of witnesses, important witnesses, witnesses who would remember that moment when everything unraveled. I smiled as I delivered the coffee, setting Derek's cup down with the kind of deference he expected. He didn't even look at me, too busy basking in the investor's attention. Perfect. Let him feel untouchable. Let him believe his own myth. Because I had 3 years of patience saved up, and I was about to spend it all. The IPO documents arrived on my desk at 4:15 p.m. on a Thursday. 800 pages of financial projections, technical specifications, and legal disclosures that would determine whether Arden 1 Technologies could go public. Derek had forwarded them with his typical brevity: "Need your eyes on the tech sections. Due Monday." 3 days to review what should have taken 3 weeks. But I didn't complain. I ordered Thai food, told Lily I'd be working late, and dove in. By midnight, I'd found the first discrepancy. Our data privacy protocols, the same ones Derek had dismissed as paranoid overthinking, were misrepresented in the risk assessment section, where I'd documented critical vulnerabilities in our encryption standards. The filing claimed industry-leading security measures with no known weaknesses. By 3 a.m., I'd found 7 more. The most damning was buried on page 447 in a footnote about our compliance with California Consumer Privacy Act regulations. Derek had signed off on a statement claiming we were fully compliant, when I knew for a fact we were storing user behavioral data in ways that directly violated CCPA guidelines. I had the emails to prove it, messages where Derek explicitly told the engineering team to worry about compliance after the IPO. I sat back in my chair, staring at the screen. This wasn't just corner-cutting or aggressive optimism. This was securities fraud, the kind that didn't just cost money, it cost freedom. Part of me wanted to confront him immediately, to march into his office first thing Friday morning and demand he fix it. But I knew how that would go. He'd gaslight me, claim I was misunderstanding the regulations, maybe even suggest I was trying to sabotage the company's future. No, I needed to be smarter. I spent Friday creating 2 versions of the technical documentation. The first was Derek's version, the sanitized, optimistic fiction he wanted to present to the SEC. The second was reality complete with supporting evidence, email trails, and code commits showing exactly when and how our security measures had been compromised to meet Derek's aggressive deadlines. "You look tired," Sarah from marketing said, passing my desk that afternoon. "Just excited about the IPO," I replied, forcing enthusiasm into my voice. "It's a big moment for all of us." She nodded, but something in her expression suggested she wasn't buying it. Sarah was smart. She'd probably noticed the pattern too, how Derek's innovations always seemed to emerge right after closed-door meetings with me. That evening, I did something I'd never done before. I called my lawyer. Not the company lawyer, my own, paid for with money I could barely spare. "Hypothetically," I said, after explaining the basics, "if someone discovered material misrepresentations in an IPO filing, what would be their obligation?" "Hypothetically," she replied, "they'd have a legal duty to report it. The SEC takes this very seriously. We're talking potential criminal charges for anyone who knowingly submits false information. And if that person had evidence that the misrepresentations were intentional," a pause, "then hypothetically, that person would want to be very careful about how they proceeded, document everything, consider whistleblower protections, and maybe think about whether they want to be at that company when everything comes to light." I thanked her and hung up. Outside my apartment window, San Francisco glittered with the lights of 1,000 other startups, each one chasing their own IPO dreams. How many of them were built on similar foundations of lies? The weekend passed in a blur of preparation. I created encrypted backups of everything, every email, every document, every piece of evidence I'd collected over 3 years. I researched SEC whistleblower procedures. I even reached out to a few journalists who specialized in tech industry investigations, using a burner email to gauge their interest in a potential story about IPO fraud at a prominent Bay Area startup. But I also did something else, something personal. I pulled up the original code I'd written for our core platform. My code. The elegant algorithms that had made Derek's fortune possible. And I studied it with fresh eyes, looking for something specific. There. Line 3, 847. A comment I'd added during a particularly frustrating all-nighter HL temporary workaround for DL's impossible deadline. This will cause issues with CCPA compliance. Fix before any regulatory review. HL, Hannah Langford. DL, Derek Langford. Dated 18 months ago. I'd been leaving breadcrumbs all along without even realizing it. Digital DNA embedded in the very foundation of the company, proving who had really built what, and more importantly, proving who had known about the problems from the beginning. Sunday night, I sat at my kitchen table with 2 envelopes in front of me. One contained the sanitized IPO documentation Derek expected. The other held the truth USB drives with encrypted evidence, printed emails, code documentation, and a detailed timeline of every violation I'd discovered. Tomorrow, I would deliver one of these envelopes. The question was which one? My phone buzzed. A text from Derek. Hope you're not overthinking those docs. Remember, perfect is the enemy of done. That winky face, that condescending reminder of my supposed tendency to overthink, as if caring about federal regulations and user privacy was some quirky personality flaw. I looked at Lily's medical bills spread across the table, looked at the photo of us from better days, before the cancer, before the treatments, before I'd traded my integrity for a steady paycheck. Then I picked up both envelopes. I'd deliver them both. Derek would get what he expected, but others, the ones who actually cared about the truth, would get what they deserved. The IPO was scheduled to be announced in 6 weeks. Derek's $9 million bonus would vest the moment we went public. If I played this right, he'd never see a penny of it. Monday morning arrived with typical San Francisco fog. I walked into Arden One's offices at 7:45 a.m., Derek's sanitized IPO documents tucked under one arm. He wouldn't be in until 10, he never was, but I wanted everything to appear normal. Morning, Hannah, James from engineering called out. Burning the midnight oil again. You know me, I smiled. Can't help myself. I placed Derek's envelope on his desk, exactly where he expected it. Then I returned to my office and opened my laptop. 3 emails to write, 3 fuses to light. The first email was to our internal legal department. I kept it simple, professional. During my review of the IPO documentation, I noticed several discrepancies between our stated CCPA compliance and our actual data handling practices. I believe we need to address these before proceeding with the filing. I've attached supporting documentation for your review. Please advise on next steps. I attached a carefully curated selection of evidence enough to demand attention, not enough to reveal the full scope of what I knew. The second email went to Jennifer Martinez, an attorney specializing in securities law, whom I'd found through careful research. She had a reputation for taking on corporate fraud cases and winning. Ms. Martinez, I'm writing regarding potential securities fraud in an upcoming IPO filing. I have substantial documentation of material misrepresentations that I believe constitute deliberate deception of investors. I would like to discuss whistleblower protections and proper reporting channels. Are you available for a confidential consultation this week? The third email was the most delicate. Rebecca Liu at TechRun had broken 3 major startup fraud stories in the past year. She was thorough, ethical, and most importantly, she protected her sources. Ms. Liu, I have information about serious issues at a prominent Bay Area startup preparing for IPO. This involves potential fraud, violation of privacy regulations, and deliberate misrepresentation to investors. I can provide extensive documentation, but I need to ensure my identity remains protected. If you're interested, please respond to this secure email address. I sent all 3 emails within 5 minutes of each other, then deleted them from my sent folder and cleared my browser cache. It could still find them if they looked, but Derek had always been too arrogant to monitor employee communications closely, another one of his oversights. By 10:30 a.m., Derek had arrived in his typical whirlwind of energy and expensive cologne. He summoned me to his office almost immediately. "Hannah, my favorite overthinker," he grinned, holding up the envelope. "Please tell me you didn't rewrite the entire thing." "Just a few minor corrections," I said. "Nothing that should delay the filing." "See, this is why I keep you around. You catch the little things." He leaned back in his chair, feet up on his desk. "Though honestly, between you and me, the SEC barely reads these things. It's all just checkbox compliance." "I'm sure you're right," I agreed. He studied me for a moment. "You okay? You seem different today." "Just excited about the IPO," I said. "It's been a long journey." "That it has?" His smile widened. "Tell you what, when this goes through, I'll make sure you get a nice bonus. Not 9 million nice, but nice enough. You've earned it." The condescension dripped from every word. A pat on the head for the good little engineer who knew her place. "That's very generous, Derek." "Hey, I take care of my people." He was already turning back to his monitors, dismissing me. "Oh, one more thing. The Northbridge team wants to do a final technical review before they sign off on the Series C extension. Can you handle that? Maybe try to be less intense this time." "Of course. When?" "Thursday, 2 p.m. And Hannah positive vibes only. Okay, we're selling a dream here, not a nightmare." I nodded and left his office. 4 days. I had 4 days before that meeting. By lunch, I had my first response. Jennifer Martinez could meet me Wednesday evening. The legal department hadn't replied yet, but I could see from our internal system that they'd opened my email 3 times. Someone was paying attention. Tuesday brought the second response. Rebecca Liu was interested, very interested. She suggested a secure messaging app for further communication and asked for a sample of the documentation to verify its authenticity. I sent her Derek's signed attestation of CCPA compliance alongside the email thread where he explicitly instructed the team to violate those same regulations. Her response was immediate. "This is explosive. Can we meet in person?" Wednesday morning, the legal department finally responded, not by email, but in person. Margaret Zhao, our chief legal officer, appeared at my desk at 8:15 a.m., her face carefully neutral. "Hannah, could we discuss your email in my office?" I followed her to the executive floor, noting the way other employees watched us pass. Margaret closed her door and activated the white noise machine standard procedure for sensitive discussions. "These allegations," she began, "are extremely serious." "I know. If what you're suggesting is true, it could derail the entire IPO, cost the company millions, maybe sink us entirely." "I know." She studied me for a long moment. "You have proof, real, documentable proof." I pulled out a single USB drive. "Everything's on here. Emails, code commits, document revisions. 3 years of evidence that Derek knowingly misrepresented our compliance status and technical capabilities to investors." Margaret's hand hovered over the drive, but didn't take it. "You understand what happens if you're wrong." "I'm not wrong. And if you're right, then the company has a choice," I said. "Fix it now, before the SEC finds out, or continue with the fraud and face the consequences later." She finally took the drive. "I'll need to review this with outside counsel. In the meantime, I have to ask, have you discussed this with anyone else?" The question I'd been expecting, the one that would determine everything. "I wanted to follow proper internal channels first," I said, which was technically true. "But I also have a legal obligation to ensure this fraud doesn't proceed. I hope the company will do the right thing." The implicit threat hung between us. Margaret was too smart not to hear it. "Give me 48 hours, she said. "Don't do anything irreversible until then." I agreed and left her office. 48 hours would put us at Friday afternoon. The Northbridge meeting was Thursday. The timing would be tight, but manageable. That evening, I met Jennifer Martinez at a small cafe in Palo Alto, over coffee. I laid out the full scope of what I'd discovered. She took notes on a legal pad, her expression growing more serious with each revelation. "This is a textbook case of securities fraud," she said finally. "If you go forward as a whistleblower, you'd have strong protections under Dodd-Frank. You could also be entitled to a significant percentage of any penalties collected." "I don't care about the money," I said. though that wasn't entirely true. I just want this to stop. Have you considered the personal cost? She asked. Whistleblowers often face retaliation, blacklisting, years of legal battles, even with protections. It's a difficult path. I thought about the meeting where Derek had laughed at me, about 3 years of stolen ideas and diminished contributions, about Lily's medical bills and the experimental treatment we couldn't afford. I've already paid the personal cost, I said. Now it's time to collect? Thursday arrived faster than expected. I woke at 5 a.m. to a text from Margaret Zhao. Need to discuss your findings urgently. My office, 7 a.m. The early morning summons could mean only one thing. Outside counsel had reviewed my evidence. The question was whether they'd decided to kill the messenger or the message. I arrived to find Margaret wasn't alone. 2 men in expensive suits flanked her desk. Legal pads at the ready, the company's external counsel, no doubt. Hannah, Margaret began without preamble, we've spent the last 36 hours reviewing your documentation. These are serious allegations. They're not allegations, I corrected. They're facts, documented facts. One of the lawyers, silver-haired, stern-faced, leaned forward. Ms. Mercer, do you understand that if this information becomes public, it won't just affect Mr. Langford? The entire company could collapse, hundreds of jobs lost. And if we proceed with fraudulent IPO documents, I countered, what happens when the SEC discovers the truth? Because they will. These aren't minor oversights. This is systematic deception. Margaret and the lawyers exchanged glances. What do you want? She asked finally. I want the company to file accurate documents, fix the compliance issues, tell the truth to investors. That would delay the IPO by months, maybe kill it entirely. Better than federal prison. The second lawyer spoke up. You mentioned following internal channels first. We appreciate that. But we need to know, have you taken any external actions? I met his gaze steadily. I've consulted with legal counsel about my obligations as an employee who's discovered potential fraud. I was advised that I have a duty to ensure this doesn't proceed. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. We need more time, Margaret said. The board should be informed. Derek should have a chance to respond to these accusations. The Northbridge meeting is at 2 p.m. today, I interrupted. Are you planning to let Derek present fraudulent information to secure funding? Silence. 48 hours, Margaret had said, but we both knew the Northbridge meeting would force their hand. I left the meeting and went straight to my office. At 11:30 a.m., Rebecca Liu messaged through our secure channel, Can you meet today? I have follow-up questions. I agreed to meet her after the Northbridge presentation. One way or another, everything would be in motion by then. At 1:45 p.m., I made my way to the conference room, the same room where Derek had humiliated me just weeks before. This time, I noticed. Security cameras were recording. Good. Derek was already there, all smiles and confidence. Hannah ready to dazzle them with our technical superiority. Absolutely, I said, taking my seat. The Northbridge team arrived promptly at 2. Emma Walsh, the partner who'd witnessed my humiliation, gave me a brief nod. Professional recognition between women who'd seen too much. Derek launched into his presentation with typical flair. Growth projections, market opportunities, the revolutionary potential of our platform, all built on the foundation of lies, detailed in those IPO documents. Then came the technical review portion. My turn. I stood, clicked to my first slide, and made a decision that would change everything. Before we discuss our technical capabilities, I began, I need to address some critical compliance issues that have come to my attention during the IPO preparation. Derek's smile froze. Hannah, I don't think... Our current data handling practices violate CCPA regulations in 7 specific ways, I continued, clicking to the next slide, a slide that definitely wasn't in Derek's approved deck. Our IPO documentation claims full compliance, but as you can see from these code reviews and internal communications, we've been knowingly non-compliant for over 18 months. The room erupted. Derek shot to his feet. This is completely inappropriate, Hannah. You're telling the truth, I finished. Something that's been in short supply around here. Emma Walsh leaned forward. Ms. Mercer, these are serious accusations. Do you have evidence? Extensive evidence, which I've already provided to our legal department and am prepared to submit to the SEC if necessary. Derek's face had turned an alarming shade of red. You're trying to sabotage this company. This is corporate espionage. No, I said calmly. This is whistleblowing, and it's protected by law. One of the Northbridge partners was already on his phone, likely calling their legal team. Another was furiously taking notes. Emma Walsh just watched me with something that might have been approval. I think we need to postpone any funding decisions until this is resolved, she said quietly. Derek slammed his hand on the table. This is insane. She's a disgruntled employee trying to— I'm the employee who built the products you've been selling, I interrupted. Every algorithm, every innovation you've claimed credit for, and I'm done watching you endanger this company with your lies. Margaret Zhao chose that moment to enter the room, flanked by the two lawyers from our morning meeting. Gentlemen, ladies, she said formally, I'm afraid we need to suspend this meeting. The board of directors is convening an emergency session to address serious concerns about our IPO filing. Derek turned to her, desperation creeping into his voice. Margaret, you can't possibly believe. The evidence is overwhelming, Derek, she said quietly. I suggest you contact your personal attorney. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. $9 million, evaporating in real time. As the Northbridge team filed out, Emma Walsh paused beside me. That took courage, she said quietly. If you ever need a reference, call me. Derek remained in his chair, staring at the table. For once, he had nothing to say. I gathered my things methodically. 3 years of patience, culminating in 15 minutes of truth. You destroyed everything, he said finally, his voice hollow. No, I replied. I just stopped letting you take credit for building it. I left him there and went to meet Rebecca Liu. By tomorrow morning, the story would break. Startup Darling's IPO, derailed by fraud allegations. CEO's $9 million bonus frozen amid investigation. 48 hours. That's all it had taken. 2 days to dismantle 3 years of lies. As I walked out of Arden One's building, possibly for the last time, my phone buzzed. A message from Jennifer Martinez. SEC is opening a formal investigation based on your disclosure. You're now officially a protected whistleblower. Congratulations. Hannah, you did the right thing. The right thing. It had cost me everything: my job, my stability, possibly my future in tech. But for the first time in 3 years, I could breathe. Friday morning, 6:47 a.m., my phone hadn't stopped buzzing since Rebecca Liu's article went live at midnight. Arden One Technologies' IPO in jeopardy as whistleblower reveals systematic fraud. The headline was everywhere. TechCrunch, Hacker News. Even the Wall Street Journal had picked it up. Derek had tried calling 17 times. I didn't answer. By 9 a.m., I was back in Arden One's offices, summoned by the board for an emergency all-hands meeting. The usual Friday energy was gone, replaced by hushed conversations and anxious glances. I kept my head high as I walked through the corridors I'd helped build. The main conference room was packed. Board members I'd never seen in person occupied the front row. Margaret Zhao stood at the podium, her expression grave. Derek sat to the side, his usual swagger completely deflated. He looked like he'd aged 5 years overnight. As many of you have seen in this morning's news, Margaret began, serious allegations have been made regarding our IPO documentation. The board takes these claims extremely seriously. A hand shot up from the engineering section. Are we still going public? The IPO has been indefinitely postponed pending a full investigation. The room erupted in worried murmurs. Stock options, the golden handcuffs that kept most of us here, were suddenly worthless paper. Margaret continued. Effective immediately. Derek Langford has been placed on administrative leave pending the outcome of the investigation. Derek stood abruptly. This is a witch hunt. I've built this company from nothing. Sit down. Mr. Langford, the board chairman said coldly. You'll have your opportunity to respond to the allegations through proper channels. But Derek wasn't finished. He turned to face the room, searching for allies among the employees. You all know me. You know what I've sacrificed for this company. And now, because one disgruntled employee couldn't handle criticism. Stop. The voice was mine. cutting through his performance. I stood up from my seat in the back. Just stop. Every head turned to me. You want to talk about sacrifice, I continued, walking toward the front. Ask the engineering team who actually built our products. Ask Sarah about the marketing strategies you claimed as your own. Ask James about the 60-hour weeks debugging code while you were at investor parties. You vindictive, Derek started. I'm not finished. I pulled out my phone, connected it to the presentation system. Since we're all here, let's look at some facts. The screen lit up with an email thread, Derek's instructions to ignore compliance requirements, his signature on false attestations, code commits showing my contributions versus his non-existent ones. This is illegal, Derek shouted. She's sharing confidential. Actually, Margaret interrupted, as a protected whistleblower, Ms. Mercer is within her rights to present evidence of fraud to affected parties. I clicked through slide after slide. 3 years of evidence, methodically presented. The room was silent except for the occasional gasp as another deception was revealed. The saddest part, I said, reaching the final slide, is that we had something real here. Our technology is solid. Our team is brilliant. We could have succeeded honestly, but that wasn't enough for you, was it, Derek? You had to have it all, the credit, the glory, the millions, even if it meant destroying everything we built. Derek's lawyer, he'd apparently called one overnight, whispered urgently in his ear, but Derek pushed him aside, his face contorted with rage. You think you've won, he snarled. You've destroyed hundreds of jobs, killed a company, all for what revenge? You think any startup in the valley will hire you after this? She's already got 3 offers, Emma Walsh said from the doorway. The Northbridge partner walked in, followed by several other VCs I recognized. We came to meet with the board about possible restructuring options, but first, we wanted to make something clear. She turned to address the room. Northbridge Capital, along with several other firms, would be interested in funding Arden 1 under new leadership with integrity, technical leadership. The board chairman stood. Ms. Mercer, could we speak with you privately after this meeting? I nodded, but I wasn't done. I turned back to Derek one last time. You asked why I did this. It wasn't revenge. It was justice. For every developer whose work you stole. For every investor you lied to. For every user whose data you put at risk. And yes, for that moment when you called my work a joke in front of everyone. I gestured to the frozen bonus number on the screen, $9 million. Looks like the joke's on you now. Security appeared at Margaret's signal, ready to escort Derek out. He gathered his things slowly, his movements mechanical. As he passed me, he stopped. I could have made you rich, he said quietly. You could have been honest, I replied. We all would have been rich anyway. He left without another word. The room remained silent for a long moment after his departure. Then someone started clapping. James from engineering, then Sarah from marketing. Soon the entire room was applauding not for the spectacle, but for something else. Relief, maybe, or hope that the company might actually survive this. The board chairman raised his hand for silence. We have difficult days ahead. The SEC investigation will be thorough. Some of you may be called to testify. But I want to be clear, anyone who comes forward with information about fraudulent practices will be protected. We're going to rebuild this company the right way. As the meeting dispersed, colleagues approached me one by one. Some offered thanks. Others shared their own stories of Derek's deceptions. A few just squeezed my shoulder in silent support. Margaret pulled me aside. The board meeting is in an hour. They want to discuss your future here. I'm not sure I have one, I said honestly. That's what we need to discuss, she paused. For what it's worth, Hannah, you saved this company, not from failure, from something worse, from becoming another cautionary tale about Silicon Valley excess. An hour later, I sat before the full board of directors. The chairman cut straight to the point. Ms. Mercer, we'd like to offer you the position of Chief Technology Officer, effective immediately. We'll also need an interim CEO while we search for a permanent replacement. The board believes you're uniquely positioned to lead the technical restructuring we need. I thought about it. The company I'd helped build. Finally free from Derek's toxic leadership. The chance to do things right. To build something honest. I appreciate the offer, I said slowly. but I need to decline. Surprised looks around the table. Arden 1 needs fresh leadership, I explained. Someone without the baggage of the past 3 years. I'll help with the transition, ensure our technical documentation is accurate, assist with the SEC investigation, but then I'm done. What will you do? Margaret asked. I smiled, thinking of the conversations I'd had with Emma Walsh and other VCs, the ideas that had been percolating while I documented Derek's lies, the vision of what a truly ethical tech company could look like. I'm going to build something new, something that puts transparency first, where contributors get credit for their work, where compliance isn't an afterthought but a foundation. The board chairman nodded slowly. We understand, but we'd like to invest when you're ready. As I left Arden 1 for the last time, I felt lighter than I had in years. Derek's $9 million bonus would never materialize. The SEC would make sure of that. The company would survive, probably thrive under honest leadership. And me, I had work to do. Real work, honest work. My phone buzzed. Lily. Saw the news. I'm so proud of you. When do we celebrate? Tonight, I texted back. And this time, I'm picking up the check. For the first time in 3 years, I could afford to. The boardroom was silent after my announcement. 24 hours ago, they'd watched their CEO escorted out in disgrace. Now I was turning down his job. I need you to understand, I continued. This isn't about revenge or pride. Arden 1 has incredible potential, but it needs leadership that can heal the culture Derek poisoned. That's not me. I'm the whistleblower. Half the team would see me as a traitor, the other half as a vigilante. Neither perception would help the company move forward. The board chairman, Robert Krishnan, a veteran of 3 successful IPOs, leaned back in his chair. That's remarkably mature thinking, Ms. Mercer, but we still need your expertise during the transition. I'll stay for 90 days, I offered. Help stabilize the technology, work with the SEC investigators, ensure the new CTO has everything they need. After that, I'm out. And this new venture you mentioned, Emma Walsh asked. She joined the board meeting as Northbridge's representative. I pulled out a single sheet of paper, not a fancy pitch deck or an elaborate business plan, just core principles written in plain language. Truth Tech, I said. A development platform built on radical transparency. Every code commit tracked and credited. Every decision documented. Privacy controls that users can actually understand. No black boxes. No hidden algorithms. No stolen credit. Emma's eyes lit up. You're talking about reimagining how tech companies operate. I'm talking about building what Arden 1 should have been. I looked around the table. We've created an industry where founders like Derek can thrive by taking credit for others' work, where fake it till you make it is considered wisdom, where lying to investors is just optimistic projecting. I want to build something different. Margaret Zhao spoke up. The legal ramifications alone would be minimal, I interrupted, because everything would be transparent from day one. No secrets means no scandals. No stolen work means no lawsuits. It's amazing how simple business becomes when you're not constantly covering lies. Robert studied me for a long moment. You've thought about this for a while. 3 years, I admitted. Every time Derek stole an idea, every time I had to fix code at 3 a.m. because he'd promised impossible deadlines, every time I watched brilliant engineers burn out trying to meet fabricated metrics, I thought about how it could be different. We want in, Emma said simply. Northbridge will lead your seed round whenever you're ready. As will Krishnan Ventures, Robert added. Consider it a pre-commitment. I hadn't expected this. I haven't even incorporated yet. You exposed a $9 million fraud to protect investors you'd never met, Emma pointed out. That's the kind of founder ethics we want to bet on. The meeting concluded with handshakes and promises of future conversations. As I gathered my things, Margaret pulled me aside. The engineers want to talk to you, all of them. They're in the main conference room. I found 43 developers waiting for me. The entire technical team. Sarah from marketing was there too, along with several designers and product managers. The room fell silent as I entered. James spoke first. We heard you're leaving. After the transition, I confirmed. And starting something new. I nodded. We want in. The words came from Maria. one of our senior architects. Whatever you're building, we want to be part of it. I looked around the room. These were the people who'd built Arden One's technology while Derek took credit, who'd worked weekends and holidays to meet impossible deadlines, who'd watched their work get twisted into marketing lies. I can't poach from Arden One, I said carefully. The legal implications. You're not poaching, James interrupted. We're volunteering, after our contracts allow, of course. But Hannah, we've spent years building someone else's vision. We want to build something that matters, something honest. My throat tightened. It won't be easy. We'll be starting from scratch. No guaranteed salaries at first, no fancy offices, just the chance to build something right, Sarah finished. We know. That's why we want in. I spent the rest of the afternoon in impromptu strategy sessions, engineers sketching architecture ideas on whiteboards, designers debating interface principles, product managers discussing features that would differentiate us from every other platform. It was like watching a dam break. All the creativity and passion that Derek had suppressed came flooding out. Ideas that had been dismissed as too complex or not sexy enough suddenly had space to breathe. By 6 p.m., we had the skeleton of something remarkable. Not just a product, but a movement. A new way of building technology that put ethics and attribution at the center. We should use blockchain for the attribution system, suggested Kevin, one of our younger developers. Immutable records of who contributed what. But make it invisible to users, added Maria. The complexity stays under the hood. And open source the core platform, James said. If we're about transparency, let's go all the way. I furiously took notes, feeling something I hadn't experienced in years hope, not just for a successful exit or a big payday, but for the chance to build something that mattered. My phone buzzed, a message from Jennifer Martinez, my lawyer. SEC is moving fast. Derek's assets have been frozen pending investigation. Looks like that $9 million is going to become restitution for defrauded investors. I shared the news with the group. A few people cheered, but most just nodded grimly. This wasn't about Derek anymore. It was about what came next. 90 days, I said, looking around the room. I'll be here for 90 more days. Then I'm starting Truth Tech. Anyone who wants to join once their contracts allow, reach out. But for now, we have a job to do. Arden One needs to survive this crisis, and that means fixing 3 years of technical debt and compliance violations. We'll do it, Maria said firmly, not for Derek's vision, but for our own careers, and because the next CTO deserves a clean foundation to build on. As the meeting broke up, people approached me one by one. Quiet conversations about equity structures and technical architecture, promises to stay in touch, the spark of something new being born from the ashes of Derek's deception. I left the building as the sun set over San Francisco, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. My phone had 17 missed calls from Derek. I deleted them unheard. He was the past, a cautionary tale about what happens when ambition divorces itself from integrity. Tomorrow, I'd start the real work, building something new, something honest, something that would make it impossible for another Derek Langford to steal credit for other people's dreams. The $9 million bonus he'd never see. That was just a number. What I'd gained freedom, respect, and the chance to build something meaningful was worth infinitely more. I called Lily as I walked to my car. Hey, want to help me name a company? The one that's going to change Silicon Valley. That's the one? I've got a million ideas, but first, we're celebrating. My treat this time, I got my test results back today, full remission. I stopped walking, tears suddenly blurring my vision. Lily, that's amazing. See, good things happen when you stand up to bullies. Now come on, we've got a future to plan. She was right. For the first time in 3 years, the future looked bright, and this time, I'd be building it on my own terms. 6 months later, I stood in a converted warehouse in Oakland, watching my team put the finishing touches on Truth Tech's first product launch. No fancy South of Market office for us, just honest space for honest work. Hannah, we're live in 5 minutes, James called out. Now my CTO and co-founder, 37 engineers had joined us after their Arden One contracts ended. Sarah led marketing with a team of 12. Even Emma Walsh had left Northbridge to become our chief investment officer. I pulled up LinkedIn on my phone, scrolling past the usual Silicon Valley noise until I found it. Derek Langford's profile, seeking new opportunities in strategic consulting. The mighty fall fast in tech. After the SEC filed formal charges, Derek's reputation had become radioactive. The $9 million bonus he'd counted on frozen, then liquidated to pay back defrauded investors. Last I heard, he was living in a studio apartment in Daly City, trying to launch a podcast about entrepreneurial resilience. 2 minutes, someone shouted. I put my phone away. Derek was the past. This was the future. The screen lit up with our platform's interface. Clean, simple, transparent. Every line of code attributed to its author. Every decision documented. Every privacy setting explained in plain English. We'd built what Arden One should have been a platform that respected both its creators and users. Going live in 10 seconds, James announced. I thought about that conference room where Derek had called my work a joke. About 3 years of stolen ideas and suppressed innovation. About choosing justice over comfort. 3, 2, 1. We're live. The room erupted in cheers as our servers came online. Within minutes, the first users were signing up. Developers tired of seeing their work stolen. Companies ready to build on a foundation of transparency. Investors who understood that trust was the ultimate competitive advantage. My phone buzzed. A message from Rebecca Liu. Covering your launch for TechRun. The headline writes itself. Whistleblower who toppled a CEO, now building the anti-Arden One. Want to comment? I typed back, just this we're proving that success doesn't require deception, that transparency can be a superpower, that giving credit where it's due isn't weakness, it's wisdom. Also, I added, tell your readers we're hiring, but we only want people who understand that we built this, not I. As celebrations continued around me, I stepped onto the building's small balcony. San Francisco glittered across the bay, thousands of startups chasing their dreams in those towers. How many were built on lies? How many CEOs were taking credit for their team's work right now? Proud of you, Lily said, joining me outside. She looked healthy, vibrant, the experimental treatment fully paid for by my whistleblower settlement. We did it, I said. No, she corrected. You did it. You stood up when it mattered. You chose truth over comfort. You gave up a $9 million future to build something real. Derek's bonus was $9 million, I corrected. My future is worth much more than that. She smiled. Remember what he said, that he could have made you rich. Yeah. Joke's on him. You made yourself rich, just not in the way he understood. I looked back through the windows at my team, our team celebrating the culmination of 6 months of furious building. Tomorrow would bring challenges, scaling issues, competition, the inevitable attempts to discredit what we were doing. But tonight, we'd proven something important. You could build great technology without destroying people. You could succeed without stealing credit. You could create wealth while maintaining wealth of character. Derek had taught me something valuable. Though not in the way he'd intended, he'd shown me exactly what kind of leader I never wanted to be, what kind of company I'd never build, what kind of compromises I'd never make. The party continued past midnight, engineers demoing features they'd built, designers showing off interfaces they'd crafted, everyone's name attached to their work, permanently recorded in our blockchain attribution system. As I finally headed home at 2:15 a.m., I passed Arden One's old building. Dark now, the company having moved to smaller offices after the downsizing. They'd survived, barely, under new leadership, but they'd never quite recovered from the scandal. My phone had one final notification, an email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line, "You were right." I opened it. Derek. Hannah, you'll probably never read this, but I needed to say it. It's 3 and I'm watching your launch take off while I sit with my 5th rejection this week. You were right about all of it. I built something shallow and acted shocked when it crumbled. I borrowed brilliance and called it leadership. I claimed victories and passed off the failures. I see it now too late. But I see it. You earned every bit of your success. I never did. I'm sorry. I'm not asking for anything, just thought you should know. D. I stood there on the empty street, reading it twice. Then I archived it and kept walking. Some bridges, once burned, couldn't be rebuilt. Some jokes, once told, couldn't be taken back. But that was okay, because I wasn't looking backward anymore. I was building forward, one honest line of code at a time. In the end, Derek had been wrong about the joke. The real punchline wasn't his frozen bonus or fallen empire. It wasn't even my success or vindication. The real punchline was simpler: integrity pays better than deception. It just takes a little longer to collect. As I reached my car, the first reviews of Truth Tech were already hitting social media. Finally, a platform that treats developers like humans. Transparency as a feature, not a bug. The future of ethical tech starts here. I smiled, thinking of that conference room 3 years ago, of Derek's laughter, of my silence. Who's laughing now? Not me. I was too busy building. Thank you so much for listening to this story of justice, perseverance, and truth prevailing in the corporate world. I'm curious, where are you listening to this story right now? Please share in the comments below so we can connect with fellow listeners around the world. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed this tale of workplace revenge, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever witnessed similar situations in your workplace? What would you have done in Hannah's position? Share your experiences below, and let's discuss how we can build better, more ethical work environments together.